Hi, in this video I'm going to show you a number of different ways in which you can separate kick and bass guitar by using compression. So let's go! So a couple of weeks ago I made a video on how to separate kick and bass guitar by means of EQ. And if you haven't seen that video, I will have a link over here so you can have a look. Now this week I want to tackle the same problem, fighting kick and bass guitar, but I want to solve that problem in a different way by using compression. So let's first have a look at the project. So over here you can see the same Cubase project as I used for demoing the separation of kick and bass guitar by using EQ. I have a bass guitar track on top and I have the separate drum tracks here at the bottom, but I've only enabled the kick and the bass guitar. So let's first have a listen to this combination. Yeah, so this needs some work to separate out the kick and the bass guitar a bit more. Let's have a look at the problem in a more visual way. And I'm doing this by using Pro Q3 and enabling the external spectrum also from the kick drum. So the white spectrum will be from the bass and the red spectrum that you'll see will be from the kick drum. And I have enabled collisions in Pro Q3, so it will show in a glowing red color where the frequency spectrums of the kick and the bass guitar might be overlapping. So this is a screenshot of what I just played, and you can see clearly that, well, somewhere between 50 and 100 Hz, there are some possible collisions that FabFilter detects. Let's now have a look at the first way to solve this by using compression, and that is by using sidechain compression with the stock Cubase compressor. So what I want to do in this case is I want to duck the bass guitar at the moment that the kick hits, because the masking of these instruments only happens when they sound at the same time, which is actually quite a short moment. Now what I want to do for that first is that I want to set up a trigger track that will trigger the compressor on the bass guitar, but I don't want that trigger track to be any of the tracks that you actually hear in the project, because I might put all kinds of processing on it and I might vary volumes, and I don't really want that to influence the ducking that I'm going to implement. So I'm going to make a copy of the kick in track. I'm going to call it kick trigger. Not routed to anything. And I'm going to put that below the kick group because it's not actually routed to the kick group. At the same time I want to solo defeat it. So I'm pushing Ctrl Alt and click, because I basically always want this track to feed audio to the compressor, even when I have other tracks soloed. Now the next thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to put a compressor on the bass. So this is a standard Cubase compressor, and I want a slightly higher ratio, maybe around 5:1, short attack, short release, because I really want to make this effect as transparent as possible, so I don't really want the obvious pumping of the bass guitar like you get in dance music, but it's only intended to get the bass out of the way at the very moment that the kick hits, so that you can clearly hear it, and after that the bass can come back up quickly so that you can hear it in its full bloom. Now the analysis I'm setting it to peak, and I'm turning off the makeup gain so that it doesn't actually undo the changes that I'm making. Dry mix I'm setting to 0% because I only want to hear the affected signal. Now then I also want to enable the sidechain and use my kick trigger to trigger the compressor, and then use the threshold to make sure that I get some gain reduction on the bass channel. So let's have a listen. Now if you now only listen to the bass, you can hear the effect that it has on the bass. Now if you listen to it in solo, you can hear that some of the attack of the bass guitar gets cut off, and that's exactly what we want, because we want the kick to shine through at that moment. So the attack, the punch, is coming from the kick drum, and the bass rises up after the kick hit. Let's listen to this combination again with and without the ducking compressor. And what you'll notice is that you can hear the kick more clearly when I enable the compressor. Let's first start without it. Yeah, so the differences might be subtle, but it's often just enough to get rid of that build-up in the low frequencies and get a more clear separation between these two instruments. Okay, I just said that the differences of that first method of ducking might be subtle, but if you solo the bass, you can clearly hear it ducking at the beginning of every note. So let's now have a look at an even less drastic way of ducking, and that's by using dynamic EQ with Cubase's Frequency 2 plugin. So the idea of this is that we're still going to duck the bass, but we're only going to duck it in a certain frequency area that we can carve out by means of Frequency 2. As I showed you in the beginning in FabFilter, you could see that the overlapping frequencies were mainly between 50 and 100 Hz. So let's use the second band here to cut that frequency range. But I don't want to cut it all the time. I only want to cut it when the kick hits. So for that we can enable dynamic EQ on this band and only show the parameters of this band. And again, I'm going to enable the sidechain. And you can see here now that there are 8 sidechains because you have 8 frequency bands. And let's just use sidechain 1. And again, add the kick trigger track. Now for my EQ, I need to select that I want to use sidechain 1 as the sidechain of this dynamic EQ. And let's again set this to a compression ratio of 1:5 or 5:1. Short attack, short release as well, because I only want to duck when the kick hits. And if all's well, you should see that this frequency is now ducked whenever the kick hits. And it already works even without adjusting the threshold at all. So let's now have a listen at just the bass guitar and see how it affects this track. So I don't know about you, but I definitely think this is way more subtle than the full ducking of the bass guitar that I showed in my first method. So this is definitely less drastic. But let's have a listen to the combination and turn the dynamic EQ on and off. And again, listen to what happens to the sound of the kick when we play the combination. Yeah, to me it just sounds a bit tighter and I can more clearly hear those low frequencies of the kick when it hits. But how do you hear this? Which method do you like best? Leave it in the comments. Now the third way that I'm going to show you to separate kick and bass by compression involves buying a plugin, and that is Trackspacer by Waves Factory. One of the subscribers of this channel actually told me about this plugin because I didn't know it, and it actually works quite magically. It is sort of similar to the dynamic EQ method, but you don't have to figure out the frequencies to duck yourself. The plugin does it for you. So let's have a look. So again, I have my bass channel and I'm going to put Trackspacer on there. And I'm going to feed Trackspacer with the kick drum again. However, in this case, I don't want to use the kick trigger because this plugin actually listens to which frequencies are featured in the sidechain. So I want to choose my full kick group here, so that it chooses the frequencies to duck after I've done all my processing on the kick and I've gotten a certain kick sound. Now you can set up the parameters of this ducking as well. Again, I want a relatively fast attack and a relatively fast release. And let's see what it does. So the blue line is basically the kick that you saw in here, and the white line is basically what it ducks in the bass guitar when the kick hits. Now you can even choose to not duck the full frequency range, but only duck up until 200 Hz, for example. where we know that the overlapping problems are. And listen to it with and without the plugin. I'll start without first. Yeah, it's noticeably tighter when the plugin is enabled. So which method of separating these instruments did you like best? Let me know in the comments. And if you like this video or find it useful, please share it, give it a like, subscribe to the channel and ring the little bell icon so you know when I post another video. It really helps me out by triggering YouTube to show it to more people. Now obviously what I showed you in this video was just by using compression to separate kick and bass. But on the real full mix, there's obviously more to it to make these instruments sound well and nice together. And that's exactly what I'm showing you in this video on top here. So have a look at that, enjoy, and see you soon.